wanted freedom. Adjust the frames. Got keys to kingdom. Unlocking chains. Sober the podcast. Open up your brains. Sober the podcast. Let's get it, man. Yep.
Welcome back to another episode of Sober the Podcast with your host, Bradley Saxon, and CJ and Clifton in the house.
What's up?
Today we got a special guest, Mr. Dan Lian.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for coming, chopping it up with us in the lab and telling us how Jesus has done for you.
Yeah.
But before we get started, we typically do an icebreaker. What's so funny?
Let's break that ice. Yeah.
Breaking ice with our what we call 3-point challenge.
Yep.
And CJ has spent all week trying to calculate 3 questions that might stump you. So
Okay.
I'm going to let CJ
Like
go
the general
ahead.
knowledge questions?
Yeah.
Like, okay, wow. All
I'm
right.
not real sure. What are they around a specific topic?
They're around weightlifting.
All right, let's go.
You know, we've done our research.
I
we
try.
know you're a weightlifting nerd, is what was told to us.
Yeah.
Old school weightlifting nerd.
Oh, that might work too then. Okay.
So you
might
got
get
something?
it.
You
Yeah, I
might
do.
get it?
All right,
Okay.
so,
Let's go.
All right, so question number 1. Who has won the most world's strongest man competitions?
Okay, so I'm not like world's strongest man.
Okay.
That's not bodybuilding.
That's
Okay.
not my. Yeah, I'm more like Pumping Iron, Ronnie Coleman, kind of in between.
Okay, so I got more questions.
in between that period. But
who is that?
Wait.
Maurice Pujanowski.
Pujanowski, the Polish.
Yeah.
The Polish.
Yeah.
Like he
Well,
could probably
strong
like
man.
pick this place up.
Yeah.
Is that pretty
Oh,
much
yeah.
who he is?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I was
all
gonna
right.
say
Okay,
Paul
let's go.
Anderson.
Who was you going to say?
Paul Anderson.
Okay. So, who has the most Mr. Olympia wins all time?
Most would be, I think Ronnie Coleman has like a bunch, and he outdid Arnold. I'm gonna say Ronnie Coleman.
So, Ronnie Coleman is right, but
Nice.
there's a tie.
There's a tie, and he is tied with
John Defendus. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he is tied with.
I want to guess.
Okay.
Can you give me give me the first initial?
I'll give you the first letter of the first name.
Yes.
L.
Lee Haney.
That's it.
Yeah.
I've never heard of Lee Haney. Was that what you were going to say?
No, but when he said the L, I thought of Lee Haney.
Yeah.
I'd imagine he's a
Lee
freak
Haney was
too.
the man,
Yep.
bro.
It's
He was
Lee
a
Haney.
beast.
He's a
I like
small.
this.
Yeah.
They both got 8. They both got 8
Yep.
titles. So,
Wow, that's
Yep.
crazy.
yep.
What's
So-
Arnold got? 7?
Arnold, 7. Arnold was 7, and Lee Haney was 8, and Jay Cutler's up there with him too.
Jay Cutler.
Jay Cutler don't have
Dorian
that
Yates is a
4 or 5,
bunch.
doesn't he?
Yeah. Yep, Jay Cutler, him and Ronnie
was the
battled
other
all
guy?
those years.
Dorian Yates.
Oh, yeah,
was
I've
like
heard of him. Yeah.
the father
He's
of
the-
the
he-
monster figure. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a very objective answer, so you
Okay.
can't really get
So
this one
subjective.
wrong.
Okay,
Yeah,
subjective.
Yeah,
All right,
so
yep.
you can't really get this one wrong.
Okay.
Who is the greatest power lifter of all time?
The greatest power lifter of
Just widely viewed as the
Yeah.
greatest of all time.
the greatest of all time is Doug from the YMCA. Doug from the gym.
Doug?
There you go.
There's no doubt, bro.
I don't know if he's the strongest, but definitely the most intense,
Yeah.
consistent. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you'll say goodbye to him at like 5 p.m. on like a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And get like an early workout in on like Wednesday morning, and he's still there.
Oh, yeah.
He never
Doug
He
is
just
the
lifted through the
MVP.
night. I said, bro, did you come in early? No, I didn't leave.
Nah.
Yeah.
It's a 12-hour session, 3-hour warm-up.
Yeah.
6
Doug is
hours.
the real MVP.
Yeah. So,
Out
yeah,
of
I'm gonna say
Anderson, South Carolina.
Doug from the YMCA.
There you go.
Wow.
Well, then there you go.
Who did you have?
So it's Edward Cohen.
That sounds
Edward
like
Cohen.
that sounds like a strong power lifter's name,
I don't
but
know.
Yep.
Edward Cohen.
Ed Cohen.
Yep. Ed Cohen.
Dan, the coolest thing about this couch is it just sort of levels us, like it helps us take our titles off, takes, this off, and we just all become people who love Jesus.
Yeah.
And we like to minister our love for Jesus and what he's done for us. And so one of the ways that we like to sort of shape the testimony is we just talk a little bit about what it was like for you, Dan, growing up, where that was.
Yeah.
Like, did your family life, was it a good home? Did you come from a broken home? Because, that story is usually different. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Melbourne, Australia. And my mother and father migrated to Australia in 1974.
Wow.
They're from Malaysia. And my father went there to study, get an education. He had a dream to be an accountant, start an accounting firm. And so as a young guy, I think he was like 23, 24, moved to Australia without a lot of English and just started hustling and working really, really hard. And I was born a couple of years after that. And at that stage, Australia wasn't a super multicultural country. Without going too deeply into it, Australia had some pretty strong immigration policies until like the mid-60s. So migration really only started in Australia, late 60s, early 70s. So I was like, stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
Just a little Asian kid hanging out in, it was a high migrant area, but in a very white Australia. And so my upbringing, the reason I say that is my upbringing was amazing. Growing up in Australia is a great country. It's chill. It's beautiful. The weather is great. There is a kindness in society. But I was just super different. And especially when I started middle school, my parents worked really hard to send me to a private boys' school, and I was in a class of about 250 kids, and there were 2 kids who weren't white, and I was one of them. And so my childhood was probably framed by the Australian experience with just standing out, feeling weird, looking weird, and a lot of people letting me know that I was weird. And so
So you were born in Australia?
Born in Australia,
Okay.
yeah. I was born in Australia, and really embrace. So my entire upbringing was I didn't look like an Australian, so I didn't feel Australian, and I couldn't speak Chinese, so I didn't feel Chinese. So I always felt like I didn't quite fit, and that's important to understand because that kind of like framed definitely most of my teenage years. Just super. I felt like I was always out of context. I always felt like people didn't understand me, and that kind of flowed into anger and antisocial behavior, which really marked my teenage years.
Well, and it's crazy because even talking with other guys coming on, like, when Woody came, I could tell that the hesitance was, I don't have a story like y'all's. But what I learned as you hear is that our story only is different from the way we cope with what you're talking about that we all have, which is this disconnection from God. We're left in our own skin with our own devices to figure this thing out, and we feel weird. And like that was like what he said is my childhood. Like I felt like a sore thumb. I felt like nobody understood. I felt like people was constantly talking about me. And I just realized the thing we all have in common is we're dead in sin. Regardless of the way that we deal with that. Us, obviously, drugs.
We have more than that in common as well.
Sure.
Like, we're dead in sin, and we've been kicked out of the garden. We're butt naked trying to work out how to cover ourselves. We are made for an everyday relationship with God, and we don't know how to get our way back into that. We are there's a fracture.
Don't even know we're missing it.
We don't know we're missing it. There's fracture with the people around us. Like when you go back to the Bible and read Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3, you'll see the state of man and woman, and all the way through history. And every single human being has so much more in common. Not only in their present state, but in their past state. Than we sometimes reflect on. And so, I felt like, man, I was just trying to work out who I am, why I'm here, and it was quite the ride and the adventure, trying to uncover some of those answers to those questions.
Did you play any sports or anything?
I played every sport growing up. Did you? Yeah, I tried because so you got to understand it does something to you. Like one of the most formative experiences growing up was, again, random. So my mother and father were born in Malaysia. Just to give you guys some context, I'm not assuming that you understand. Okay, so I'm Chinese by ethnicity. That's my blood. But Malaysia is a small country in Southeast Asia. Okay, So Asia, the continent, but then there's like there's China that flows down through the parts of Southeast Asia, so Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. You have Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. My father and mother were born in Malaysia, originally from China, but they were born in Malaysia.
Okay, gotcha.
And Malaysia has Malaysia is a great country. It is a nominal Islamic country, so there's no Sharia law there, but it is ruled by Islamic political parties.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's an Islamic country, have incredibly harsh drug laws.
Yeah.
So if you get caught with drugs there, it's the death penalty.
Yeah.
And one of the most formative things that happened to me as an elementary school kid is that there were 2 Australian guys who got caught smuggling heroin in Malaysia, and they were sentenced to death. Which caused an incredible political rift between Australia and Malaysia. Because Australia is saying, you can't execute 2 of our people. Malaysia's going, they broke laws in our country. And it was like the biggest political firestorm for quite a period of time. So I'm this Malaysian kid at school. And I'm just trying to find my way through life, make some friends, find some context. And all of a sudden, overnight, I became the guy who was from the country that was going to murder 2 Australians.
Yeah.
And overnight, I lost all of my friends.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
I still remember going down
What
to this.
grade were you in?
I was like in the 3rd grade.
Wow.
And I remember going down to this like level, like this little. Did you play marbles growing up?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
marbles. So I was going to like this little section of the school where you play marbles with. And it's at lunchtime, and I was going to go see all my friends, and I got told I wasn't allowed to play with any of them because my family were murderers.
Wow.
Wow.
And now I think back, like so much of my life was in response to rejection, worrying about not fitting in. If you've ever heard me preach before, I will use my ethnicity as a self-deprecating, like humor.
Yeah.
But that was all just a response to feeling weird for being Malaysian, Chinese. And that really like scarred me deeply. And so, hey, just like all of us, at some point in our journey, we just ask the question, like, why am I here? And like, where do I fit?
Yeah.
And does anyone really get me? Does anyone care enough to get me? So that really marked my elementary school years. And like I said, it then just went to the nth degree when I went to this private boys' school where there were 2 ethnic kids in my 7th grade year, and every other kid felt like they needed to let me know how different I was. So we're all just trying to work out where we fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. That's crazy. But I mean, it's crazy because I just identified to a T.
Yeah, dude. Me
And
too.
I just like what he said about the fact that the universal problem is that we need to be rescued by Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we all have, like we may not know behaviorally the same, but like we all have felt that way.
Yep.
You know, like just separated, you know, lost, just we all felt that way. And so I think that's just the cool thing about hearing these stories of getting context of a new lens that we get to perceive you through too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times all we know about Dan Lian is his gift. But here's the truth, you're not your gift. And when you sit on this couch and you start to talk about your past, like it gives me a new lens of saying, wow, I'm glad I know that now because this gives context to the glory, the pain, the access. And it's just like, man, it's so crazy how we see that, but we have no idea about these men's story.
Yeah.
And it's just from a early age, he's just like us.
Yeah.
You know?
Is that the culture, Dan? Like, because I hear boarding schools, like and I don't really have any type of experience with that. Like even around here in this area, like was boarding school like part of different cultures, different countries?
So I went to a private boys' school. It wasn't a boarding school.
Yeah.
But it was it's a big part of definitely Australian British culture.
Okay. Yeah.
You didn't live there though. You went home every day.
You went home every day,
was
but
like a private
it really
school.
was. It was like it's different than private school in and around here, but the tradition, the the connection to heritage and the past, and it all basically everything flows from Mother England. Yeah. And
so was it private as far as like did they teach their religion?
No. It wasn't a religious school as much. Honestly, a private school is just you pay a lot of money to keep your kids in a pretty isolated place to have access to every. That's the reason I played every sport growing up.
Right.
When I was growing up, I just didn't feel like I fit, and so the way that I worked out how I was going to fit in was I was going to be the most Australian kid ever.
Yeah.
And Aussies love playing sport. So it's like cricket in the summertime, football in the wintertime. And the private school that I went to gave me a lot of access to playing sport. So played field hockey. I played...
rugby?
Rugby is in a different region.
Okay.
When you say football, is that soccer to you?
No, football's an Australian football. So just Google it, just have a look at it on YouTube.
But it's different.
It's different. It's like wild. It's like it's played on the largest sporting field, professional sporting field in any professional sport on planet Earth. So the field's about 200 yards long, and 18 men on each side. Everyone's built like a
brick house,
like an athletic, basically between a tight end and a wide receiver.
Wow.
Everyone's just picture 36 wide receivers all running around this giant field.
Pads or no pads?
No pads. Barely any clothes.
Yeah.
Like tiny little shorts, like little tank tops, because the goal is trying to kick a ball through a bunch of big sticks. And you can get tackled from 360 degrees. The game doesn't stop. It just keeps flowing, and the ball gets kicked high in the sky. So these guys are... That's the reason, in collegiate football and even in the NFL, there are so many Australian kickers. They don't play rugby. That's not when they say, it's a rugby kick. It's not a rugby kick. Those are Australian rules football players who have come over because the sport of AFL is to kick a ball that looks very similar to a football. And a good kicker can kick the ball about 60, 65 meters,
crazy.
which is about 72, 78 yards.
That's crazy.
And that's the reason they're so attractive to college recruiters. And I got a couple of friends who actually play in the NFL now who are Australians who learned how to kick the ball playing AFL. So I played all of that. I did everything except for swim. I can't swim.
You can't swim now?
I can't. If a boat capsized and I would have to swim 30 meters from Hartwell, I can do 30 meters. But if it's like, the boat's going down, we have to wait for like an hour for the rescue boat to come,
trouble.
just tread water. It's like, hey, I love you. I'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, we're going to heaven today.
Yeah, so I try to do everything, just trying to find some identity.
Yeah.
My entire life, everything was about the down the track, the music that I listened to, the art that I engaged in, the sport that I played was all just trying to work out like who I was and have some kind of context and identity.
So what year did you graduate high school? I'm trying to frame up.
Okay, yeah. So I graduated high school in 1994.
94, okay.
How old were you, CJ?
I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So technically 93. So yeah.
So he's my sister's age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a freshman in 93, so just trying to think of the times.
Yeah.
No, so I started college in 94. So 93. So 93 was when I graduated, finished my high school. The high school and middle school systems and all that kind of stuff's a little different in Australia, but I was done with high school in 93.
Where'd you go to college?
I studied in a couple of places. Went to the big state college where I'm from, Victoria University, as well as I did my post-grad stuff at a Bible college, like the Melbourne. It's called like the Melbourne School of Theology.
What'd you major in?
I started with business and accounting, and then
Following your dad?
Yep.
Did your dad did he become an accountant?
Yes. Yep. So he studied, did his accounting, and like just a brave man, just went out into the workforce and try to work out how to speak English along the way, and worked out to be proficient at that. Bet on himself. Started an accounting firm. He called it Andrew, Lian and Associates. He didn't have any associates. He just saw all the successful firms were called something and Associates.
Yeah.
I love that.
It was prophetic.
So he just I'm going to be called the Associates.
Yeah.
So he's like, so he started Andrew, Lian and Associates, and then kept on doubling down and working harder and harder, and then finally got Associates, built a very successful business. and then had the opportunity to cash out and then run a smaller practice, which allowed him to play a lot of golf. And
Is that where you got it from?
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
great.
no, I kind of got it because in Australia, you just play everything. Like, so Australia is, you got to visit one day. It is just, it's a utopia. It's just like, it is like a beautiful country. The weather's like Southern California. But the culture is very laid back because Australia was a penal colony. It was like a prison that, so people from England who had stolen bread or committed like petty crimes, the prisons were full in England. So they threw them on like ships, sent them down to Australia. It was like a giant prison. So just think about an entire country that was first populated by ex-prisoners. And the kinds of backgrounds that they came from. So like Australia is like super... it's probably a little rougher around the edges. They're a little bit like you just gotta chill out because, okay. So the only like the closest thing to a civil war that Australia's had one time since British colonization was called the Eureka Stockade. It was effectively a fight about having to work harder than they were working. So just think about like Australia's history. Really, if you look back 200 and nearly 50 years now, the one time the whole country nearly fought was basically over the government trying to make the people work more than they were working. And they said, no, we're not doing this. So they locked themselves in the Eureka Stockade, and knocking down the Eureka Stockade, like a handful of people died in that conflict. So Australia's history is incredibly... It's chill. It's surrounded by water. There's like gold and iron ore and uranium and coal in the dirt. It's a small population. It's relatively well educated. So because of that, there's like a lot of resources and opportunity for people to play sport, to stay fit, and that's what I did. And so that's how I got into weightlifting and bodybuilding because partly because I was getting picked on when I was at this boys' school, and I went and told my headmaster, "Hey, I'm getting beat up on the bus every single day." He said, "Well, let's go to the weight room at lunchtime." So that's how I got into weights when I was 13 years old. They, instead of like stopping the bullying, they just made me go to the weight room.
I like it.
And that's the reason. Like I'm 48 now, and like lifting weights has been a part of my journey since I was 13. But it all just came out of, again, identity, trying to deal with insecurity, trying to work out who I was.
So was your family religious at all?
Yeah.
Your mom and dad, were they Christians?
Yeah, they would have. They were both. There was a lot of missionary work that flowed through Southeast Asia, especially post Second World War, and my mother and father both came into relationship and connection with Jesus at some point in their upbringing. Now, for it manifested in a different way. Like just growing up, it was not like around here. A lot more laid back, and like, so for me, I didn't really get involved with any church stuff that I can remember until I was 17. Until like there was a girl named Krista who became my wife, and she was really involved in this local youth group. So I'm like, yeah, I love youth group too. I love it. Church is great.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, the
No
songs
doubt.
and the praying, I love it. I'm all about it. So growing up, it wasn't like what I've experienced here. Like so many people who just, they got drugged to church and that was their life. That really wasn't. It was a lot more just, hey, choose your own adventure. If you want to, you can. If you don't want to, like my brother never really went. So my brother came to Christ about 7-8 years ago. Just before we moved to the States, and he spent his entire life basically, nah, I'm good. Like, I know for me. Really started hanging around church and then finding just some older voices in my life. Again, still looking for identity, still looking for meaning. Coming into my life around that season and then going, hey, you're asking questions that I've asked as well. I found my answers in Jesus. I think you can as well.
When did that questioning start in you?
My entire life, I've just asked questions about
God.
I've always had a sense of something being out there. It's never been a question. Like, for me, and it wasn't actually family. It was me, like, more just as I reflected on life, and if you see beauty, there's an artist behind it. A creation, there's a creator behind it. Order, there's a mind behind it. I always felt that. I just always deeply held this belief that you couldn't know whatever force or energy was out there.
You couldn't know.
I always thought it was like every religion, including the one that, the private boys' school that I went to had an Anglican, so a Church of England background. It was a dead and dry version of it. Yeah. But even for them, it was like, hey, something's out there. You're trying to sing in that general direction, but you can't really get to know whoever is out there.
So when did that start to shift for you?
I'm 17 years old, and I'm hanging out at this little youth group at Clayton Church of Christ because, again, I'm just trying to hang around Krista as much as I can. Yeah. And then there was a youth pastor there named Glenn who took the time to now I'm on the other side of the fence, and I'm the guy who's chasing greasy haired, shady, sketchy guys hanging around your church trying to snag girls. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm that guy. I can see exactly what happened. He saw me. He saw me coming from a million miles away. Yeah. And just honestly, he just was nice to me. He was an older guy who took time to hear my story and lovingly put up with the anger in my life, the frustration in my life. Really what framed my life for a lot of my teenage years was a segment of society that I really related to. Being angry, being bullied, not fitting in was West Coast rap culture in America. Yeah. So I'm telling you, the soundtrack for my life from 13 through to 17 was NWA, Ice-T. Yeah. When after they broke up, it's Ice Cube, Dre's, all that kind of period of time. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm just like brainwashing myself. I wore, it's such cultural appropriation right now, but I used to do my hair up like an afro. Had I'm in metalwork. I made an Africa symbol around my neck with the red and the yellow and the green. Yeah. And everywhere I went, it was like West Coast rap playing in my back in the back of my. The reason I say that is Glenn put up with that. Yeah. Like he said, I want to hang out with you. I said, well, the only way I'll hang out with you is if you let me play my music while we're riding in the car. Mm-hmm. So this poor youth pastor's getting,
NWA straight out of Compton.
Like that shit. And he's just like this buttoned up youth pastor listening to just the filthiest rap. Yeah. And he just endured. And I remember it used to get that got me. Even more than him telling me about Jesus and him opening up the Bible, which he did down the track. The fact that I could see him like just so uncomfortable, but listening to my rap music. Yeah. And that's how desperately he wanted to be around me. So good. That got to me. Yeah, man. And it did end up in like a lot of just conversation on a Tuesday, in my senior year of high school, on a Tuesday afternoon. He'd pick me up from school, drive me to Red Rooster, this little chicken shop, and he'd buy me chicken and chips, and he would tell me about Jesus. Mm-hmm. He'd pull open his Bible, and then he would explain how that feeling that I have that there's someone out there.
One-on-one.
One-on-one. The reason I feel that way is because God made me that way. And God made me that way because he wanted to answer the question. Mm-hmm. And the answer to the question was Jesus. Mm-hmm. So Jesus was God's demonstration of how God feels about me. Mm. And this is why Jesus had to come to earth. Yeah. And this is why Jesus lived a perfect life. Mm-hmm. And this is why Easter happened. And this is why Jesus rose again. So he would explain this stuff to me. And eventually he would kidnap me, basically. He'd do this little camping trip with a bunch of young guys every year, a beautiful camping spot, about 4 hours drive from where our youth group was. Mm-hmm. And we'd hang out by a fire, and he'd, again, share the gospel and then give us opportunities to respond to God if he touched our hearts. Mm. So we're hanging out around this campfire, and then and he's like going, all right, if you want Jesus, if you feel him, just pray this prayer. And there were like 4 or 5 guys there. And I didn't open my heart. I'm like nah, I'm good. Like, I've got too much pain in my life. If God really loved me, I wouldn't have been beat up when I was a 12-year-old by a bunch of 17, 18-year-olds. If God loved me, I wouldn't have been called all these names my entire life. And that was always the barrier. And then I remember Glenn said, well, you go sit by the lake by yourself and you just talk to God to see if he talks back. So he sends me out by this lake and I'm looking up at the sky. I don't talk about this I don't preach about this publicly because I don't want people to think that God needs to do anything more than send his son Jesus to die on the cross to show to you that he loves you. But this happened to me. I'm sitting by the lake and I look up at the sky, so I need to see a shooting star to believe. And then as soon as I'm saying this out loud, I see the shooting star fly across the sky. And the only way I can describe it, it felt like a bucket of hot lava was poured on my chest. It was crazy. It was burning. And it was the love of God. And I was transformed in that moment. And fast forward 31 years later, I can still feel that burning on my chest. So that's what changed my entire life. And that's the reason one-to-one means everything to me. So like you said, like, you know me from preaching. You'd be shocked at how little preaching to people means to me. Like, I just, it's
I relate to that statement there.
It's something that I do, and it's a grace on my life, and it's stuff that God, has, got glory from for years. But me personally, because I was led to Christ by an individual who took the time. That to me is, so on my calendar throughout the course of the week, that's where I came from this morning. That's where I'm going to this evening. That's what I love doing.
Yeah, we love that.
One-to-one. There's a couple little restaurants in and around the upstate that I spend a lot of time at with just young guys. And we talk about Jesus and his love for them and his plan for them. Amen. And it always comes back to this, like, when they're ready to go, I'll show up with a Bible. And I've done this now 37 times throughout my, the last nearly 7 years of living here. And I can keep a count because I order them off Amazon. And so I just see how many times this happens and just order a little Bible and we'll meet and I'll have a highlighter and I will go through 4 verses just to show them this is God's extension of love towards you and invitation into real life with him. And if they pray the prayer, they get the Bible and the highlighter.
That's great.
And they have to start reading John. And so that is really my greatest joy in ministry, because that's how I came to Christ.
Well, and I keep thinking about Glenn.
I was thinking
like,
about
I mean, God raised up Glens. Like, obviously we're raising up to look like Jesus, but like, I'm just thinking about how his sacrifice has made a way for many other people through Dan's life. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, man, like, that's what changed my life. Is somebody took the time to hear my story, pick me up from rehab, take me with them. Didn't know me from Adams, but had conversations with me. And so that's a lot of what we do today because somebody did it for us. And we love to preach too, man, but we say it all the time. Like, that one-on-one time with guys that we get to do life with is the greatest joy of our life, you know? And to be honest with you, in the nature of what we do, obviously we have to bury a few of them, which is the extreme case, but that love that you have for those guys when you sit on a Chipotle seat, ministering or listening, is life-changing. And Glenn would have never known what would come forth of this. And I think there's a lot of people that listen that grow weary in well-doing sometimes. But they need to know that this story of Glenn, a youth pastor in Australia, that continued to show up, continue to sow seed and sacrifice time for the sake of the gospel and other people, is doing something still. And I just want to tell whoever's listening that feels weary to not grow weary in well-doing, because at just the right time, there's going to be a harvest, and your labor is important, and keep doing what you're doing, because it makes a difference.
And, I'd like to say, too, Glenn was a youth pastor, but this type of ministry, you don't need a title because there are always people around who don't know the Lord. So you don't need permission from a church staff. You don't need to be on staff to be a witness for Jesus. I mean, it could literally be, the neighbor. It could be the kid you see, sitting somewhere alone. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, you can approach people throughout your day all the
Yep.
time.
Well, I mean,
if you got kids, who's coming to your house?
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's so much opportunity to do one-on-one ministry where you don't need a title.
Yeah.
You know?
And, you know, I've had the chance throughout the years. So, side note, in Australia, the churches aren't the same. They're not staffed the same. Every church doesn't have a great youth ministry or lots of money to put into youth pastors. I think Glenn was like a part-time dude who was studying counseling at college.
Yeah.
And he was like a youth pastor just means that the one who's most responsible out of a bunch of irresponsible people. So you're 100% right. Like we all have an opportunity if we do what Glenn did. And I've had chances throughout the years to ask, why did you do that? And he's like, well, just God brought you to me, man. Like there wasn't, and I wish he said, I just saw like a halo around you and like a call of God in your life. He said, no, God just brought you to me. And he put you on my heart. And so if we all would live life more that way, just not doing everything, but everyone doing exactly what God impresses on your heart to do every day.
Yeah.
It's you have no idea who you're taking out for chicken and chips.
Sure.
And here's the other thing, like for every chicken and chip lunch I had with Glenn, he probably had a dozen with others.
Yeah.
And
is Glenn still living?
Oh yeah. He he's a counselor. Have you heard of a ministry called Focus on the Family?
Yeah,
Yes.
on the radio.
He became the international president of Focus on the
Oh,
Family.
wow.
Years down the track.
Man, Glenn, I
wild.
hope you hear this
Yeah,
podcast.
Glenn.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Glenn
man.
Williams.
That's
amazing.
And he
Well, that's why.
he's there.
I mean, that's why he became
he's like
that,
a college, he's a
that
college
hard.
Yep.
student, just working away, studying, doing his counseling, and then finished up with our church when he qualified as a counselor. Started becoming a professional counselor. Wanted to start some family ministry in Australia. Saw that it was kind of already happening here with Focus on the Family in America. Reached out to them. They said, "Yeah, we'll bring it to Australia." And then before he knew it, he was like the Australian president of Focus on the Family.
Awesome.
And then
But that's the deal. Before he knew it,
Yeah.
like that's the statement. Like none
Yeah.
of us, our objective of anything we did was not to reach where we're at.
No.
If I would have wrote down where I thought I would have been 5 years ago, it definitely wouldn't have been in this seat with this title and this. It's just something that I think as we grow in our love for Jesus and our love for others, like we just come into some of these things that God has for us. But the heart has always been for the one.
Yeah.
And, the thing is, Glenn was doing it, it's like you say, I wish he would have seen something in me. And he's like, God brought you to me. All effective ministry, what you're doing, it is about helping the person, but it's because of this going on first.
yeah,
It's that Glenn had that connection with God to where it was about him and God first.
yeah,
It was about he loves God, God loves him, and then God brought you to him. So although it's important, the people are always second.
yeah.
Oh yeah, for
It's
sure.
about the minister, whoever is doing the ministry, them and God.
You don't want me
Because-
loving on you if I don't got God,
Yeah,
because then I'm
because
gonna,
it's like,
I'm gonna need you to
yeah,
love me as much.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
It's like, we love people, but like we're not built to be able to do ministry for our love for people.
Yeah.
It has to be our love for God that drives the ministry, or it's not sustainable.
Or when the person does something sideways, which is the nature of what we adopt, then it becomes something that hurts us because we're dependent
Yes.
upon them needing us.
Yeah, it's like he said, for every, lunch he went on, there were probably 12 others.
Yep.
And, how many of those stories do you have,
Maybe
But-
several.
Yeah, or maybe one.
One.
But if your focus is the person first, it's going to be about making, progress and like how many are going to stories like this, but if it's about you and God, the results aren't
Yeah, that's a
the
great
focus.
reflection.
You know?
Like I've lived here nearly 7 years. In May, it'll be 7 years being in the States. I've traveled back and forth to the U.S. since 2007, like preaching and doing ministry. So I understand America pretty well now, but really in the last couple of years living here, I've seen one of the greatest differences between doing ministry in Australia and America is really in Australia, there's nothing in it for you. Like Glenn didn't get paid a lot of money. Glenn wasn't going to become famous. He wasn't going to have opportunities or doors open by doing ministry. You really do it because you're crazy. And somewhere you met Jesus and he poured a bucket of lava on your heart. You have to do it. Whereas in America, there is something in it. If you do it, there is, because it's an industry and there's money you can make and there's a platform you can create and there's product you can sell. And to make sure that you wade through all of those temptations and make sure why you do what you do is because you love him, and you can't help but think that life is just about trying to tell other people about how much they're loved by him as well. And that pure connection, and maintaining that and keeping that. And if you have got to a point in your journey where what you do is done because of what you get, then repent. And it's like Jesus said to the Ephesian church in the book of Revelation, just come back to your first love. It's all good. Everyone just, hey, the heart strays. It's cool. Just coming back and sit by the lake again. Get hit by him again. Let him pour the bucket on you again.
So where did your relationship with Australia and America come?
Finish up with my undergrad, did my started my theological study, and basically had some really cool mentors come into my life. My ministry formation is really the story of God bringing disciplers into my life to disciple me. Just great mentors from an early period in my journey of serving God, who spoke into my life, helped my life, and grew my life. One of my early mentors was a phenomenal communicator of the gospel in Australia. His name's Rob Coyle, and I became one of Rob Coyle's guys. And he, as I'm starting to study and do my theology, really helped me hone my communication. So by the time I'm 21, this is what I'm doing. 2021, have sermon, we'll travel, and let's just tell the world about Jesus. So I did that all the way through my 20s, and just faithfully
in Australia.
Well, God opened up like Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia.
Gotcha.
I was traveling around basically in my 20s, that area. And then when I was 30, God brought me into a relationship with a guy named Judah Smith. He's based on the West Coast, and Judah had a really big youth ministry in Seattle during that time. And it was 2007, and he's like, I need you to come out and speak at our youth camps. We've got 2 youth camps, and it's like a couple of thousand kids each week, and I'll fly, we'll have fun, and we're going to arrive at camp in a helicopter. And I've never been on a helicopter. Let's go do that. And then basically from him, he introduced me to some friends in Baton Rouge, in San Diego, and then effectively the U.S. opened up in 2007.
Wow.
And then from that point on, from 2007 to 17, I'd be in the U.S. maybe 3-4 times a year, 2.5 weeks at a time. And I was spending a lot more of my time preaching in and around America. And then in 17, I knew that there was another faith step. For God has dealt with me and my wife. We got married when I was 21. She was 22. In 10-year blocks.
Which is Krista, the youth group Love.
The youth group Love. She looked great in jeans.
That's real cool.
And I'm just trying to be around.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And our 20s looked a certain way, our 30s looked a certain way, and in our 40th year, we knew that God was going to take us on an adventure. And my daughter was 13, my son was 11, and I went, if we don't do something, the greatest gift you ever give to your kids is a living faith. It is not an inheritance. It is not a house.
So
it's not going to be even a college education. I promise you, it's living faith.
Preach.
And they grew up in that environment with me, traveling and speaking and doing our thing, and as a family, doing camps together and traveling to countries together. But but we needed to mint in their heart what it looks like to pack 12 suitcases and buy a one-way ticket and go somewhere.
Yeah.
And so we said, hey, let's just do it for a season at a time. Let's go base in the States. I'm sick and tired of that 15-hour flight back and forth. Let's do it for a period of time. And we looked at San Diego. We love, like, Southern California. San Diego is a great city. We looked at Seattle, because I started preaching around there, probably some of my closest relationships were there. And then South Carolina. And
How did South Carolina get in the mix with those two?
Yeah, well, throughout my years in 2010, I met Brad Cooper.
Okay.
Brad and I did a youth conference together, and we bypassed friendship stage and went into brother stage pretty early.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I was traveling back and forth to little old Anderson, South Carolina, like every year, once or twice.
To CB.
To see Brad. I preached at New Spring, but
Right.
then really Brad was my, like, connection. There was something called FSKO, this big event that they ran, like, around May time, and so I'd come in and do that, but wherever I went, I never stayed more than like a day. Like, it was always, you there, you preach, you do your thing, you grab a breakfast, and it's the next flight. New Spring was the only place I'd ever come and just hang out for a day or two, hang out with a team, golf, just, eat at J. Peters again. And
What do you get at J. Peters? That big old burger?
no veggies, because southern food and I don't agree, and the only place I could buy, like, vegetables that look like vegetables was J. Peters downtown in Anderson. So that was, like, kind of and so that was, like, when they were hosting me, it was like a joke, because we'd end up back at J. Peters and he'd get just 2 veggie plates, and I just sit there just eating. I didn't even like vegetables that much, but just to try to get some roughage in my life. And those were different days. Like, the food scene has changed a lot in the upstate here, but so we would hang out and really, like, for years we talk about, hey, we need to do something together. And if you know Brad is a very convincing leader who gets an idea in his head and usually gets his way. And it was like, hey, this could be a great opportunity to come on out, to serve, to be a part of a team. But I got Melbourne, Australia to Anderson, South Carolina. That is it would feel less of a culture shock for me to move from Melbourne, Australia to Tokyo, Japan than Anderson, South Carolina.
Wow.
It was like a big.
I like how you say it. Yeah.
It was like a massive culture shock, but it's become home. And so Anderson is home now.
How long have you been here?
Coming up to 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
17. Gotcha.
Yeah. So
Well, and it's those relationships too that he's talking about, man. There's, I've got relationships with this guy, but it ain't the same as the relationship I had with you.
Yeah.
The relationships that we have with each other that's been marked for years.
Yeah.
There's people in ministry that come and go, but there's that one consistent guy. We've been walking together for 12 years, 6 years that are just imprints on your soul that says, man, I don't know where this journey would be without that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to envision what this journey would be without that guy, you know? So I'm thankful for those relationships.
how old are you?
40?
You're 40. How old are you?
45.
45.
33.
So I got you all covered. Like, I'm 48 now, and maybe in the last couple of years, it has become incredibly evident that I've got less years ahead of me than behind me. I think it's because I know my grandparents, all of them died right on 80. 4 of them all died at 80. So I always thought, you know what, like, I might get to 90 because I'm like, modern technology, medication,
Eating
health,
vegetables.
eating vegetables. So 90 was in my head. You know what? So 45 is like the halfway mark.
Yeah.
But when I got to 46, I went, you know what? Like, I can squeeze a couple more out.
Yeah.
I squeeze 48 now. There's no more debate. Like, this is it. Like, I'm on the downhill run now.
Yeah.
And when you feel that time is short, the really important things become really important.
That's good.
And the things that aren't as important, that used to rob me of my attention and my energy, all of a sudden fall to the wayside. And I can tell you, I can testify, living your life in such a way knowing that you'll stand before Jesus one day and give an account of why you did what you did. It gets you back to that whole, I just did this because I'm a friend of yours.
Yeah.
And there were times where I did stuff because I got this or I got that, or this afforded me this, or kind of gave me that. But that stuff fell by the wayside. I did this because I love you, you love me, and that framed my life. That's important. Number two, like people who truly are your family, your friends going forward. And that was it. Like, it was like, New Spring was going through a really interesting season, in 17 when we moved here. And it was like, I had friends of mine telling me, why are you going to Anderson, South Carolina? And they're like, you should, join this church or start something here or whatever. And my mother taught me a few really important lessons that have gone deep. And one of them was, if you ever see a family member in a fight, you just got to jump into the fight, even if you lose. And that was like, all right, well, hey, my family out there, hey, let's just do this.
Yeah.
And so really just serving God because you love him and you've heard from him.
Yeah.
And irrespective of what you get out of it.
Yeah. And it's easier to jump in that fight not knowing the outcome when you're doing it first for him.
Yeah. Oh, no.
So
you can't do one
lose.
without the other. So it's just, hey, God, I love you. I'm not sure of many things in life. I'm 100% sure that you've given me the job to be the husband to Krista and the father to Caitlin and Josiah. And so it is my absolute unequivocal responsibility to lead these guys in a faith journey. So here's a faith opportunity. Let's go. Let's step in together. And here are my brothers and sisters, who are fighting desperately to make sure that the kingdom of God continues to advance here. And so, that's how we ended up here in May 2017.
Yeah, the other thing I think about is, you're saying, when you hit a certain age, you start thinking I'm on the downward.
Yeah.
I got to make this thing count.
Yeah.
And the truth is, and we all know this, I'm not telling us anything we don't know, but the truth is, like, we never know when our day is. And so really, whether we're 20, 30, 40, like, we should really all have that mindset of what you were saying. Like, I may have already I might be at the end.
Yeah.
And I got to make all these days count.
I think it's Job 14 that says that every single man's life is measured out. So your days are apportioned to you.
Yep.
There's a set number. You have no idea what it is.
Yep.
But God has full awareness of what it is.
Yep.
And there is no more, there's no more discussion. There's no debate. There's no bargaining. And that's the reason the psalmist would say, then we'll teach us, Lord, to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom.
Yep.
You live a lot smarter. You fill your days with a lot more wisdom when you understand that life is a limited resource.
Yep.
And
it's going to be, we're going to be at the end before we know it.
Yes.
As I'm, 45, I mean, like, that's 45. But, I look at my parents, who are both still living, and I see them getting older. And, it's just hard to look at them and see, they're both in their 70s now. My dad played shortstop growing up, softball. My mom was a great basketball player, always active, all this stuff. And now I'm seeing they're getting older, and it's like you're starting to realize it's like life is short. Life is short, and it's going to be a blink of an eye. God willing, I'll make it to that age. I'm going to be there myself.
Yeah.
And so, the reason I say that is because making every day count, it's like there's so much that goes on in ministry. This thing right here, so much comes through this to me that's important. We lost a guy on Sunday, one of our guys, he died. And so many things come through this right here that are important. But, when I get home, I have a little boy who's coming around. I have a little boy, he'll be 5 in a couple weeks. And like you said, there's not a lot that I may know, but I do know this. I'm called to lead my family and to witness for Jesus to them.
Yeah.
And it's like, although so many things are important on this, I have to remember when I'm at home and my little boy jumps up on my lap and this thing needs
buzzing.
to take second place.
Yeah.
Because if I knew I got 7 more days on this planet,
A lot of this wouldn't be
it
important.
wouldn't even be important.
Yeah.
And so it's like we gotta really be sensitive to the spirit of, because every time my child or my wife or someone I love sees this come before them, it subconsciously puts something in them. And every time he sees me throw that to the side when he comes up and put ministry to the side, it plants something in them. So it really spoke to me about you. When you're talking about making the days count, we've got to make the days count because we don't know how many we have.
Yeah, and it's a I want this however many more breaths have been apportioned to me. I want them to be marked by a deeper understanding of God's presence, what He's up to, the adventure that every day is meant to feel like. One of the things that always used to fascinate me when I would read the Gospels is like Jesus's rhythm, and it was pretty simple. Like he was just up before everyone else, and he was off in the dark, and he was clearly meeting with his Father. And then he would give us allusions to why he would meet with his Father time and time again, because he says there's just some stuff that he knows that I don't. So a part of Jesus being fully God and fully human is that there were aspects of God's omniscience, knowing everything, that Jesus, the Bible says in Philippians chapter 2, put to the side. He laid it down so that he could relate to humanity at a depth that humanity needed.
Yeah.
So we have to then assume that he caught up with his dad in the dark early in the morning because he needed every single day an idea of what the adventure was going to feel like. And that's the reason all the way through the Gospels you'll never see any record of Jesus hurrying, of Jesus running. He walked every single day with this deep sense of purpose. And Jesus is Jesus, but to the best of my ability, I wanna follow that model of just every day having a deep sense of presence. Like, what's my assignment today?
Yeah.
Where's the adventure
absolute
today?
trust.
And trust that you've set it up, you're going to provide, your presence will be there, and and I think that's something that I want to mark my life and my journey going forward as someone who had a bucket of lava poured on his chest by his love. And I want my everyday to feel like, man, it's an adventure.
Yeah.
And like, what kind of exciting episodes are we going to write today?
The God adventure.
Yeah, the God adventure. Amen.
So I want to share something with you as we conclude that I've never shared with you. And matter of fact, I don't even know that I've recalled this in years. But I'm sure that you would say with your journey of moving to America, that if you would have wrote down what you thought would happen in these 7 years, that God would have surpassed what you thought by miles. You would have sold yourself short.
Yeah.
January the 1st, 2017. Okay, so in that time, you preached a message at New Spring.
Yeah.
I wish I could tell you the title, but it was through your experience of moving here.
Yeah.
It's about this bold faith move. I think it was something entitled that.
Yeah.
Well, your sermon, my wife and I held hands that day, and tears began to flow out of our eyes because God was telling us to start this place.
Wow.
And when I came out of that sermon, I knew that we were going to have to write the vision down. We were going to have to put it out there for the people to come and help us run with it. And look at what's this, 5, 6, 7 years later, we've graduated nearly 300 people.
Wow.
We've probably seen 250 profess Christ be baptized. And, a lot of people's like, why you get these guys? You just trying to get your followers up? And I was like, no, these guys are pivotal men in my journey personally that helped cultivate faith.
Wow.
To do something that my mind could not perceive. Brad Cooper, huge role when I got called into ministry and turned my life in 2010, right? And you never knew this because I never had a chance to tell you, but that sermon that day, if it didn't help anybody, it planted a seed in my family that today, because listen, when I walked, my wife said, I don't know about this journey. She said, if anybody can do it, you can do it. But the first year, God helped her see that he could do it. Because she still was that skeptic of, you're wanting to quit your job? You know, because my wife's real technical. She likes this and that. And she's like, you're going to quit your job? You're going to not get paid for a year? You're going to... And that whole first year when we stepped out, God just started doing something crazy.
Incredible. Wow.
And so...
Sheesh. All right, that was worth getting out of bed this morning to hear that story.
Well, and I want you to know that I know you're human like us, and that I want you to know that God's using you.
Thank you,
and
man.
you're making a difference, and
Means the
keep
world.
on blazing that path, man, because you just never know. Like, we never know how God is using you. And I just wanted you to know that he used you in our life to start something that we never could have fathomed would be. Because if we would have wrote down what we thought when we took our faith step, we would have sold ourselves really short.
Yeah.
So
Man,
we love you, bro, and we're
you
just
guys.
thankful you would come by and share your story. I heard some things today. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Encouraged me.
I love it.
And
I love
know
you, man.
these guys too. So here is the ultimate factor of the podcast is whether or not you got a jumper. So you get, how many did you get right?
Hey, did y'all
3?
play a lot of basketball in Australia?
I did play a lot of basketball.
Okay,
Again, remember
okay.
hip-hop culture?
Okay, yeah.
I just...
And I still need my revenge on golf.
You do need
My
some...
son told me to throw that in there today. He said, Dad, I ain't seen him at Fuse lately because I told him he heard what you said on stage. He said, I'm going to get him if I see him, but if you got him today, you let him know you going to get him.
You, me, and Nicholas will get out there again real soon, and we'll have some revenge on the golf course.
All right, Dan, make this shot.
All right, we're going to make this golf shot.
Oh,
Okay,
That's
one,
one.
two.
Let's go!
I love you guys.
All right,
so
we
much.
love
for
you.
sharing, man.
Until next time.
Peace.
Yeah.